Daniel Reeves hadn't been back to the Evergreen Lakes community since his father's funeral 6 years ago. Tidy lawns, painted fences, the type of suburban perfection that felt too quiet to trust. But now, with his mother Evelyn recently discharged from the hospital and still dizzy on her feet, Daniel found himself pulling into the same cul-de-sac he once skateboarded through as a kid. The house looked unchanged. His mother, thinner now, stood on the porch with a weak smile and an oversized cardigan wrapped tightly around her shoulders. "Still smells like lemon polish," Daniel muttered, stepping inside. But something was off. It hit him in the kitchen. A sharp, acrid scent, like metal dipped in pool chemicals, clung to the air near the sink. Evelyn turned on the faucet with a faint sigh. "The HOA's been flushing the pipes again. Something about seasonal maintenance. Smells worse each time." Daniel leaned in, sniffing the stream. Chlorine. But something else. Almost burnt. "Have you been drinking this?" Evelyn waved a hand. "They said it's fine. Everyone's water smells like this now." Everyone? Daniel made a mental note. He watched her sip from a glass anyway, the clear liquid trembling slightly in her wrinkled hand. Later that afternoon, while his mom dozed off in her recliner, Daniel wandered outside. A neighbor walked by, Mrs. Patel, who lived 2 doors down. She was carrying a jug of bottled water and gave him a knowing look. "Yours smell like bleach, too?" Daniel asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "I don't trust it anymore. My husband got stomach cramps for a week. The HOA said it was the weather." She rolled her eyes. "We started buying gallons from Costco." Daniel's stomach tightened. A neighborhood-wide issue dismissed by the HOA? That didn't sit right. He walked back to the kitchen and rummaged through a drawer until he found an old water test kit, one of the cheap, instant kinds he used back in college for his environmental science class. Expired or not, it was better than nothing. He ran, the cold tap filling a clean glass, and dipped the strip. The colors bloomed almost instantly, deep orange, streaked with green. Contaminants were off the scale. Copper, chlorine, nitrates, the exact mix that could cause the nausea and weakness Evelyn had been feeling for weeks. The back of his neck prickled. He snapped a photo of the strip next to the glass and checked. The HOA bulletin board online. A vague note read, "Community notice. Minor chemical presence detected in preliminary tests. Safe under current EPA standards. Advisory. Run water for 30 seconds before drinking. Clear Source Utilities is monitoring levels. No action necessary." Minor chemical presence? He clicked the link for Clear Source Utilities. The page looked hastily thrown together. No phone number. No licenses listed. A single generic mission statement. Water clarity for communities that care. Nothing else. He went back to the kitchen, pulled open the cabinet under the sink, and inspected the main shutoff valve. It was marked with a fresh blue tag, labeled with a date only 3 days ago. Someone from ClearSource had been here recently, without warning, without permission. Just then, Evelyn stirred in the other room. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" Daniel forced a smile. "Yeah, Mom, just fixing a leak." But his gut told him otherwise. That night, while Evelyn slept, Daniel opened his laptop and searched for advanced water testing labs nearby. He found one 20 minutes away that accepted walk-in samples. He filled a mason jar with tap water, sealed it tight, and placed it in his backpack. Tomorrow, he'd get answers. But when he stepped outside the next morning, he found something strange on the driveway. A plastic warning cone he hadn't seen before, marked with the ClearSource logo, and his mother didn't remember anyone putting it. There! The plastic cone was still on the driveway when Daniel returned from the lab later that afternoon. It hadn't moved an inch, bright orange, almost mocking. The logo on it, ClearSource Utilities, looked like it had been printed on a home office printer and laminated badly. His mother, Evelyn, was watching daytime TV and didn't remember anything unusual. I thought it was for the landscapers, she mumbled, her voice weaker than it had been yesterday. Daniel didn't press. She seemed more tired than ever. He set the sealed water sample on the counter, then pulled out his phone and called the number listed on the HOA's emergency maintenance contact sheet. After 2 rings, a woman, with a vaguely chipper voice, answered, "Clear Source Utilities, Community Support Desk." "Yes, hi," Daniel said. "I live at 128 Willow Lane. I want to know when someone was last out here. There was a cone left in our driveway without notice." Pause. Clicking keyboard noises. According to our record, the Evergreen Lakes site received standard chemical flush protocol on Monday. That includes your residents. You're flushing chemicals into the drinking water without telling residents? She didn't answer right away. It's part of a seasonal maintenance cycle and within guidelines approved by the HOA. Who approved it? Any further questions can be directed to your HOA board. We only operate under their direction. Click. The line went dead. Daniel's next stop was the HOA office, an over-air-conditioned room tucked beside the community clubhouse. Fluorescent lighting buzzed overhead as he stepped inside, greeted by a wall of brochures and a smiling receptionist who looked like she'd been told to smile or be fired. "I need to speak with Martin Clay," Daniel said. "It's urgent. I have health concerns about the water at my mother's house." She typed something and frowned. "Mr. Clay is in a meeting." "I'll wait." 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Finally, the inner door opened and a tall man in a fitted suit strolled out. Martin Clay, HOA president, a smug former attorney with the voice of someone who always thought he was the smartest man in the room. "Daniel Reeves, right?" he said without waiting for confirmation. "I heard your mother wasn't feeling well. Sorry to hear it, but I'm told it's nothing serious. Fluctuating pH, a few elevated minerals, happens all the time in older homes." Daniel pulled out the photo of the test strip from his phone. "These results say otherwise. That's from her tap. You think this is normal?" Martin barely glanced at it. "Uncertified test. Probably user error. Look, Mr. Reeves, we've had professionals from ClearSource overseeing the system. It's all documented, EPA compliant. You're creating panic where there isn't a problem. Then, prove it. Let me see your water reports. The real ones." Martin's lips twitched into a tight smile. "Everything's been reviewed and approved by the board, but I'll tell you what. Bring me an official test result from a certified lab, and we'll review it at the next monthly meeting." "In 4 weeks?" Daniel snapped. "That could be too late." "Then perhaps you'd like to request a hearing through proper channels. Otherwise, I suggest you not alarm the neighbors with misinformation." With that, Martin turned and walked back through the office door, closing it behind him with the finality of a prison cell. Daniel stood there, seething. The receptionist avoided his gaze. Back at the house, Evelyn was asleep again, her blanket pulled up to her chin despite the heat. Daniel sat beside her, scrolling through the photos he'd taken of the cone, the water test, the ClearSource website. Then he noticed something. In the background of one photo, the reflection in his car's rear window, stood a man in a reflective vest. Daniel zoomed in. The man wasn't a utility worker. He was holding a phone, taking a photo of Daniel. Daniel couldn't shake the image of the man in the reflective vest. His face was blurry in the photo, but his stance was unmistakable. He'd been watching him. And it wasn't just curiosity. The way the man held the phone, angled, just so. It felt calculated. He uploaded the photo to a facial recognition database, one of those free public tools designed for amateur sleuths. The results were useless, but the sense of being surveilled stuck with him. The next morning, the water lab called. "Mr. Reeves," the technician said carefully, "we've analyzed your sample. You were right to be concerned." "How bad is it?" Daniel asked. "Elevated chlorine and copper, well beyond municipal thresholds. But more alarming is the trace benzene, industrial solvent, illegal in residential water systems. Long-term exposure could cause neurological damage. You need to get your mother off that water immediately. Daniel stared at the phone. You're sure? Positive. If you want a full report for legal or environmental agencies, we can prepare that too. As soon as he hung up, Daniel filled a jug with filtered water from the fridge and dumped every pitcher and glass near the sink. Evelyn shuffled in, groggy. Danny? She asked, rubbing her eyes. What's going on? I need you to stop drinking from the tap, he said gently. I'll explain everything soon. But for now, trust me, okay? She nodded slowly, sensing his urgency. Later that day, Daniel canvassed the neighborhood. He knocked on 3 doors. No answer. At the 4th, Mrs. Patel appeared, still holding a bottle of purified water. You again? She asked, surprised. I got the lab results back, he said. It's not just chlorine. There are toxic solvents in the water. Benzene. This isn't about rusty pipes. It's poisoning. Her face tightened. I knew it. You said your husband got sick? Daniel asked. She nodded. And our next-door neighbor, Mr. Flores, he collapsed 2 weeks ago. Heart failure, they said. But he was healthy. He jogged every morning. Daniel's stomach dropped. You think it's related? She looked him dead in the eye. I know it is. He took notes, then moved on. Doors after door, story after story. Residents complaining of headaches, nausea, vomiting. Several admitted they had stopped drinking the water weeks ago but were afraid to say anything publicly. Why? Because of Martin Clay. He threatens anyone who questions the HOA, one man whispered through his screen door. Told me if I kept spreading false claims, I'd be fined and reported for rule violations. And he did. I got a $500 citation for improper trash bin placement the next day. It was a pattern. Sick residents, silent neighbors, and a leader enforcing control through petty authority and fear. Daniel compiled everything into a folder. Interviews, water reports, photos, even HOA email newsletters with shady language like non-disruptive utility protocols. He returned home, mind racing. As he sorted through the files, Evelyn sat nearby, pale and distant. You know, she said quietly, a man came to the door last week. Said he was with maintenance. I let him in because he had a badge. But he didn't do anything. Just poked around under the sink and left. Daniel froze. What did he look like? Tall, vest, didn't speak much. A chill shot through him. The man in the driveway, not a worker, not even with clear source, just watching, getting inside homes. For what? Surveillance? Tampering? He clicked through the files again, scanning emails from the HOA. Then he found one odd line in a maintenance notice sent 2 months ago. Residents with outdated fixtures will receive unannounced filtration upgrades courtesy of ClearSource field agents. Unannounced. No permission. No record. That night, as Daniel sat in the dark, rereading the lab report, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. You're making a mistake. Stop asking questions. Attached was a photo. It was Evelyn, taken through the living room window. Just minutes ago. Daniel stood frozen in the living room, staring at the photo on his phone. Evelyn was in the exact same position as she was now, reading, her worn copy of Agatha Christie under the lamp, legs curled beneath her. The image had been taken from outside through the window. The curtains were drawn, except for a 2-inch gap. Just enough. His pulse thundered. He stepped quickly to the front door and threw it open. The porch was empty. The air was still. Nothing. No car, no footsteps. Just that eerie, manufactured, quiet evergreen lakes always wore after sunset. Daniel stepped back inside, closed the door, and locked every latch. Then he unplugged the landline. It was time to dig deeper. If the HOA was poisoning residents under the guise of maintenance, there had to be records, money trails, paperwork. He didn't trust going back to the main HOA office, Martin Clay's lair. But there was another option. Every HOA meeting, according to the bylaws, required physical copies of contracts and receipts to be stored in the community storage shed behind the pool house. Martin had always insisted it was too boring to audit, and few ever did. At 1:12 a.m., Daniel dressed in black and grabbed a flashlight. The storage shed was padlocked, but not very well. The latch was loose from weathering. A flathead screwdriver and gentle force popped it open with a satisfying click. He slipped inside, heart hammering in his ears. Rows of file boxes lined the walls. Faded labels like Irrigation 19, Security, Fence Bids, and Pool Chemicals 2020. But in the far corner, under a dusty tarp, he found a small metal cabinet. Inside, bingo invoices marked Clear Source Utilities. Some handwritten, some stamped. A few had odd dates overlapping with maintenance notices, but no board meeting minutes attached. Illegal. Every expense over $1,000 needed board approval. He flipped deeper. $12,450. Emergency water optimization, Sector C $7,000. Subsurface filtering agent application 18,200. Field installation, residences 1 HOA 148. None of it made sense. No detail, no breakdowns, just vague terminology. Then, at the bottom of the pile, an unsigned contract. The vendor listed wasn't ClearSource. It was Valent Technologies. Daniel's brows furrowed. He'd never seen that name on any of the public HOA statements. The address? A P.O. box in Nevada. And the name attached? Clay Holdings, LLC, Martin. Of course. The signature line was blank, but a sticky note was attached. Backdate to March. Keep off regular minutes. Daniel pulled out his phone and snapped photos of everything. Just as he clicked the last one, Russell. Footsteps outside the shed. Daniel turned off the flashlight and ducked low behind a stack of old pool chairs. A sliver of light spilled in as the shed door cracked open. Someone was there, breathing, listening. Then, a whisper. "He's not here. Must have already left." The door clicked shut again. Daniel waited. 10 seconds, 30, a full minute. He exhaled only when silence returned. Heart still pounding, he slipped out through the back, looping around, the pool staying in the shadows. When he got home, he locked everything twice and emailed the photos to a secure drive. The next morning, Daniel opened his laptop and searched Valent Technologies. The results were vague, mentions in obscure industry databases, a few flagged EPA reviews from 5 years ago, and a dead link to a lawsuit in Arizona. Then an anonymous tip landed in his inbox. Subject: "You're not alone." The message was short. Valent is blacklisted in 3 states. Clay knew. Start with the Flores file. Your mom wasn't first. Attached, a name. Lydia Flores, widow of the man who died last month. Daniel leaned back in his chair. He didn't just have evidence. He had an ally. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that someone had just accessed the community surveillance system and zoomed in on his mother's window. Target flagged, Home 128. Next inspection, pending. Daniel didn't sleep. He sat by the front window with a baseball bat across his lap, listening to the soft wheeze of his mother's breathing in the next room. Every car that passed made his muscles tense. The shed, the photos, the contract. Someone knew. And if that anonymous email was real, then Flores's death wasn't just suspicious. It was a cover-up. The next morning, things got worse. A white envelope was taped to their front door. Inside, a formal notice from the HOA. Notice of violation. 128 Willow Lane, Code 7C, unauthorized storage shed. Entry code 4B, threatening behavior toward HOA. Personnel fine, 2,000 hearing. Scheduled, June 12th, 6 p.m., mandatory. Daniel stared at it, stunned. Threatening behavior? They were flipping the narrative, framing him as the aggressor. He paced the kitchen, heart pounding. They're trying to bury me. he muttered. Evelyn, now fully awake but pale and visibly weaker, clutched her tea. Danny, maybe you should let this go. We can leave. Move in with your cousin for a while. No, he said sharply, then softened. Mom, if we leave, they'll just keep doing it. To everyone. I found the contract. A shell company run by Clay himself. He's laundering HOA money to fund ClearSource, and they're using residents as test subjects. He didn't say the word aloud, but it rang in his head anyway. Biohazard. By afternoon, he received a call from Lydia Flores, the widow of the man who died of heart failure. Her voice was guarded but firm. I sent you the email. You're not paranoid, Daniel. They're watching all of us. How long have you known? He asked. Since Victor started getting sick. He wasn't the only one either. A woman on Gardenia Court had seizures. A child got skin lesions. Every time someone complained, Clay would slap them with citations, legal threats. He keeps people quiet with bureaucracy. Daniel felt both relief and rage. We need to expose him. I have photos, lab results, contracts. Lydia's voice dropped. Good, because I have something better. Victor installed a second water meter the HOA didn't know about. It recorded every change in flow rate and chemical presence. I saved the logs. You'll want to see them. They arranged to meet the next day. But by then, the trap had already been sprung. That evening, Daniel noticed a black SUV parked across the street. Same one from the week before, he was sure. Of it, tinted windows, no plates. Then came the knock at the door. 2 sheriff's deputies. Daniel Reeves? Yes. We received reports that you've been tampering with utility equipment and harassing community officials. We're going to need you to come with us for questioning. Evelyn appeared behind him. Officers, this has to be a mistake. Daniel raised his hands calmly. It's okay, Mom. Call Lydia Flores. Tell her what happened. They cuffed him, read him his rights. Neighbors peeked through blinds as he was loaded into the cruiser like a criminal. At the station, he asked for a lawyer. While they processed him, one deputy handed him a new citation for trespassing on HOA property and attempted data theft. It was surreal, but what chilled him the most was the deputy's final words as he was escorted to a holding cell. Should have just left the water alone, Reeves. You poked the wrong bear. Meanwhile, back at the house, Evelyn's hands trembled as she dialed Lydia's number. It rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. On the porch, unnoticed, a small, blinking black device stuck beneath the window frame, lit up, recording everything inside. They weren't just setting Daniel up. They were watching every move. Evelyn sat on the edge of the couch, her tea untouched, her fingers twitching in her lap. The silence in the house had weight now, dense and pressing, like a storm waiting to break. Daniel was gone, hauled away in cuffs, her only son, and she could feel it. The eyes. She didn't know exactly how, but she knew they were watching. She turned off every light in the house and moved into her bedroom, closed the blinds tight, sat at the edge of her bed and dialed Lydia again. Still no answer. Something wasn't right. Daniel had told her to call if anything happened. He'd mentioned files, contracts, chemical levels. Evelyn had pretended not to understand the whole thing, but she had. More than she'd let on. She had lived in Evergreen Lakes since the beginning, long enough to remember when the water first started tasting funny. She pulled an old photo album from her closet and opened. It, tucked inside, nearly forgotten, was a folded flyer from 2003, the year the HOA introduced its Green Initiative and began upgrading local infrastructure. She remembered that meeting vividly. Martin Clay had just joined the board. He'd been charming back then, slick hair, expensive suit. Promised the upgrades would save the community money in the long run. Safer water, fewer city taxes. We'll be independent, he had said. But 2 months later, 5 homes on Oak, Terrace were evacuated due to a plumbing contamination. One of the residents, a young woman named Angie Torres, had gone missing shortly afterward. Everyone assumed she'd moved away. But Evelyn remembered her differently. Angie had been outspoken, asked too many questions, just like Daniel. Determined, Evelyn grabbed a flashlight and slipped out the back door. Her legs weren't what they used to be, but her instincts were sharp. She walked the long way around the block, careful to stay in the shadows until she reached Lydia Flores's home. The porch light was off. No signs of movement inside. Evelyn rang the bell once, then again. Nothing. She stepped back. The front window was slightly open, the curtain fluttering. Evelyn leaned in, peering through the gap. The living room was empty, but on the coffee table sat a red flash drive, in plain sight. Her heart thudded. She didn't want to break in, but something deep inside told her she had to. She tested the door, unlocked. She slipped inside and quickly grabbed the flash drive. The house was eerily still, no sign of Lydia. Evelyn didn't call out. She just turned and left, closing the door behind her. Back home, she plugged the drive into Daniel's laptop. Password protected, of course. But Daniel had taught her well. He was always worried about identity theft. She tried the one phrase. She knew he always used, his old chess team name, Nightfall 27. It worked. The drive was full of spreadsheets, documents, and, most importantly, sensor data. Daily water logs, timestamps, locations, toxin levels rising and falling like tides. But what chilled her most was a document labeled Test Group Phase 3. It listed addresses. Her address, alongside it, a note. Subject aging, immune system, tolerance elevated. Accelerate dosage, Evelyn gasped. Her knees nearly gave out. They weren't just negligent. They were experimenting, and she wasn't the only subject. She printed every file she could, made copies, backups, slipped the original, flash drive into a potted plant by the front steps, her old hiding spot from years ago. Just in case. Then she picked up the phone and called the only reporter she trusted, Maxine Hale, an old neighbor turned investigative journalist. "I need to tell you everything," Evelyn said. "They're poisoning us, on purpose, and I have the proof." Daniel sat at the folding table inside the Evergreen Lakes Community Hall, flanked by 2 uniformed deputies and a smug-looking man in a cheap navy blazer, Clay's idea of a neutral moderator. The air was thick with whispers. Residents filled the back rows, their eyes bouncing nervously between Daniel and the front stage, where Martin Clay sat like a king presiding over his petty kingdom. On the projector behind Clay, a massive image of Daniel's face, a still from his doorbell, camera. The caption read, "Trespasser, disruptor, danger to the community." "This isn't a trial," Daniel muttered under his breath. "It's a public execution." He wasn't far off. Martin stood and cleared his throat. "Today we're addressing severe violations of our HOA code. Mr. Reeves has been accused of trespassing into secure utility zones, tampering with official HOA equipment, and threatening the safety of our residents." Daniel stood too. "None of that's true. I found evidence, real documents, that prove this HOA has been funneling money through fake companies and installing toxic filtration systems." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. One man muttered, "What's he talking about?" Martin's smile thinned. "We expected this paranoia. Unfortunately, Mr. Reeves is clearly under duress. He's not a criminal, just confused, and likely influenced by online conspiracy theories." A few residents chuckled. Some looked away. "You're lying," Daniel snapped. "I've got a full report from an independent water lab. Benzene in the pipes, poison. You all felt it. Nausea, headaches, rashes. It wasn't coincidence." "Mr. Reeves," Martin interrupted smoothly, "perhaps you should let the board review your findings privately." Daniel slammed a folder onto the table. Let them see for themselves. The moderator picked it up and began leafing through, but Martin subtly nodded to the deputies. One stepped forward and whispered something to the moderator, who then announced, "This data has not been officially authenticated. Therefore, inadmissible in this hearing." A low gasp rippled through the room. Daniel's face flushed. They were silencing him, again. Then the doors at the back of the hall burst open. Evelyn, hair pinned up, cane in one hand and in the other, a folder identical to Daniel's. She marched down the aisle with surprising fire for a woman her age. "I have authenticated data," she said. "From inside Lydia Flores's home, from her husband's own systems." Clay's face twitched. "I also have a list," she said, raising a paper, "of every house in this neighborhood designated as a test group. Your house might be on it. Yours, Mrs. Patel. And yours, Frank. You want to know what they're testing? Look in your water." The crowd turned. Murmurs turned into shouts. Phones came out. Pictures were taken. Clay tried to speak, but Evelyn raised her voice. "This man," she pointed at Clay, "has been using Valent Technologies, a shell company, registered in his name, to route thousands of dollars into illegal experiments on unwitting homeowners." "I can explain," Clay began, standing. "Explain the contracts then," Daniel yelled. "Backdated, unapproved, hidden from board minutes. I have copies." Reporters began to gather at the back. One of them, Maxine Hale, Evelyn's contact, raised her press badge and snapped a photo. Martin froze. Evelyn leaned in, voice cold and quiet. "Your HOA hearing is over, Mr. Clay, but your trial, that's just getting started." Outside, as officers surrounded Clay and escorted him out to an unmarked car, residents gathered around Daniel and Evelyn. "What happens now?" someone asked. "We get clean," Daniel said, "and we get justice." But Evelyn, ever cautious, glanced toward the security cameras still rotating on the corners of the clubhouse. Some battles were won, but the war wasn't over yet. The sun rose over evergreen lakes like nothing had changed. Birds chirped, kids played in the sprinklers, and neighbors exchanged polite nods. But beneath the surface, the community was fractured, and Daniel Reeves was at the center of it all. The news had spread fast. Martin Clay, once untouchable HOA president, was now under federal investigation. The fraudulent contracts, the toxic water tests, and the experiments had caught the attention of the EPA and local prosecutors. But Daniel wasn't satisfied. Not yet. The files Evelyn had recovered, and the data from Lydia Flores's hidden meter, painted a darker picture. Valent Technologies wasn't just a shell company. It was a front for a corporate syndicate specializing in chemical testing on vulnerable populations. Evergreen Lakes had been a laboratory, an experiment, and the syndicate wasn't done. Daniel sat in his mother's kitchen, surrounded by reporters, lawyers, and community members eager for answers. Evelyn poured tea, steady despite the turmoil. Maxine Hale, the investigative reporter, leaned in. "What now, Daniel? How do you move forward after everything?" Daniel stared out the window, at the familiar streets. "We can't just fix the pipes and move on. We need accountability, clean water, medical support for everyone affected, and changes that last." He held up a thick binder. "This is evidence for a class action lawsuit against the HOA and Valent Technologies. We're filing tomorrow." But before the legal battle could begin, something unexpected happened. Late that night, Daniel's phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You want to end this? Meet me at the old water treatment plant at midnight. Alone." His heart thundered. The old plant had been abandoned for years, an industrial relic on the outskirts of town. Despite warnings from Evelyn and Maxine, Daniel knew he had to go. Under the cold moonlight, Daniel approached the rusted gates. His footsteps echoed on cracked concrete. A shadow emerged. A woman stepped forward, hands raised to show she was unarmed. "I'm Mara," she said quietly. former Valent scientist. I couldn't stop what they were doing, but I'm here to help. Daniel's suspicion warred with hope. She handed him a flash drive. This contains all internal reports, proof of their plans, the extent of contamination, even names of complicit officials. Why trust you? Mara looked away. Because they're coming for you next. They've flushed everything down the drain, literally. But I want to stop it too. Back home, Daniel plugged in the new files. The data was damning. Dates, emails, footage showing clandestine chemical deliveries and unauthorized water injections, all ordered by Valent and rubber-stamped by HOA insiders. And one file stood out, a blueprint of the community's entire water system, with marked injection points still active. The next morning, armed with Mara's files, Daniel, Evelyn, and Maxine went public. News crews swarmed Evergreen Lakes. Officials were forced to shut down the contaminated water system and provide clean bottled water community-wide. Residents who had fallen ill received medical screenings, and a foundation was established for their long-term care. Months later, Evergreen Lakes began to heal. The HOA board was disbanded. New leadership was voted in, focused on transparency and safety. Daniel and Evelyn sat on their porch, the scent of fresh pine and clean air filling their lungs. "Do you think it's really over?" Evelyn asked. Daniel smiled faintly. "The water's clean. But we'll always have to watch the pipes. Sometimes the truth comes out in waves. We just have to be ready to fight the next tide." As night fell, a final scene unfolded in the shadows. A small device beeped softly beneath, a freshly replaced water valve. Some battles never end. But for now, the community had reclaimed its future, one drop at a time. The end.